Let's get started now. So I wanted to welcome everyone to the spotted lanternfly trapping update from UMass, as well as our collaborators. So my name is Tawny Samiski. I am an entomologist with UMass Extension's Landscape, Nursery, and Urban Forestry program. And I wanted to thank you all for joining us this morning, as well as mention that this research monitoring and today's free update are all made possible by funding support from UMass's Center for Agriculture, Food, and the Environment's Integrated Research and Extension Grant Program. So we thank them certainly for their support. Before we get started with today's presentation, I did want to give a few instructions regarding pesticide and association credits. And again, these are for folks that are looking for credit for a pesticide applicator's license or any of the Massachusetts categories listed here, as well as applicable New England licenses. And the associations that are listed here. So these instructions will be shared at the very end of this webinar. So we do ask that you please remain on the webinar until the end to receive these instructions. Another very important point for especially our pesticide applicators would be that you do need to answer all of the poll questions that are shared during this presentation. While the answers will not be graded, you must complete the poll questions in order to receive your credit for attending today's presentation. We, of course, also invite everybody here that is participating today to answer the poll questions with us. Also, if again, for those pesticide applicators, if you sign off the webinar early or without answering the poll questions, you will not be awarded pesticide credit. So again, that is important, and please make sure that you do so throughout today's presentation. And as I mentioned, while we were waiting for a few more folks to join us this morning, we do have a voluntary and anonymous demographic survey that is posted in the chat. So if you are willing and able, we ask that you fill out that survey. This is in order to fulfill our civil rights requirements as a recipient of federal funding. UMass Extension must report participant demographic information to the U.S. Department of Agriculture. So again, this is voluntary, so you can skip the entire survey or any question that you do not feel comfortable answering, and it is also anonymous, so we do not collect any identity or other information with this survey, and we will not be able to link your responses to your participation in this program. Okay, so without further ado, actually, nope, one more ado. I wanted to mention for those of you watching today that if you have questions that come up during the course of this presentation, just a friendly reminder to please type those into the questions section on your GoToWebinar panel here. So please, at any time, feel free to submit those questions. We will receive them, and my co-presenter, Dr. Jeremy Anderson, and I will answer those after our presentations, time permitting. So again, please submit any questions that you have as they come to you. Okay, again, I've already introduced myself, and I just wanted to mention that I'll be talking about some updates regarding the spotted lanternfly and a trapping project being done at UMass Amherst with a whole bunch of different collaborators. So I'll give sort of an outline for this talk, is that I'll start with some basic information regarding spotted lanternfly, just to make sure that everyone watching is sort of on the same page regarding this non-native invasive insect. And then I'll provide a very brief update about some of the trapping work that Dr. Jaime Pinheiro, an extension faculty member at UMass Amherst and with the Stockbridge School of Agriculture, as well as UMass Extension, has completed as a part of this project. And then following sort of my first 20 minutes or so, Dr. Jeremy Anderson will present work that he has done with Dr. Joseph Elkington in UMass Amherst's Department of Environmental Conservation, as well as information and research and work with one of our collaborators, Dr. Miriam Cooper-Band, who is with the USDA's Forest Pest Methods Laboratory. Okay, so to get started and to make sure that we're all sort of on the same page here, my assumption is that some of you joining us today know an awful lot about the spotted lanternfly, and some of you may not know too much and are here looking to learn more. So to make sure we're all on the same page again regarding this insect, I wanted to give some background information about Lycorma delicatula. So another common name of this insect is lantern moth. Now, those common names get a little confusing because the spotted lanternfly is neither a fly nor a moth, but it's a hemipteran, so it's a true bug. These are the cicadas, the hoppers or aphids, others in that order that use piercing sucking mouth parts to remove their host plant fluids. So they are feeding a lot on the fluids in their host plants and then excreting a lot of that as a liquid, sticky, sugary excrement, which I'll talk about a little bit coming up. They are a member of the family Fulgoridae, so these are also known as the plant hoppers, and I have a video towards the end of my section of this presentation that shows a bit about why they're called plant hoppers. They do have wings as an adult and they can fly, but they use jumping to aid in that movement. This map, probably many of you have shown, but just to sort of do a quick regional check-in for the Eastern United States, this is provided by the New York State Integrated Pest Management Program. It shows us where spotted lanternfly is currently known to date. Let's see, hopefully folks can see my cursor, but if not, I'll try to describe that. In 2014, the spotted lanternfly was first detected in the southeastern portion of Pennsylvania within those areas that are shown to be colored in blue here on this map, and it has since unfortunately spread. So any areas on this map that are colored blue, those represent established populations of the spotted lanternfly. So if you're joining us from Massachusetts and you remember on my first slide, it's not here yet. It's not known to be established in Massachusetts yet, but we'll talk about some sort of individual finds of the spotted lanternfly in our state, as well as others that we'll see here in a moment. So these sort of pinkish circles, those represent those individual finds where folks have notified state or federal authorities that are helping to keep an eye out for spotted lanternfly that they've found either an adult, a nymph, or in some cases an egg mass in states out or locations outside of these blue areas. So this shows us that spotted lanternfly is really good at hitchhiking. It's really good at moving around into new locations using our unknowing assistance, unfortunately, so human-aided movement. We'll talk a bit about the life cycle and life stages of the spotted lanternfly, and one of the cases is that they will lay their egg masses on just about any flat surface. So for example, you could get egg masses moving on potted plants, on wooden outdoor furniture, on just about anything. So we'll keep all of these things in mind when we're thinking about the ease of spotted lanternfly moving, unfortunately, to new locations. So thanks to the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, I do have this map to share with those of you joining us from Massachusetts who live here or work here in our state. And again, I'll sort of blow up their little blue circles here to make this easier to see, but these are representations of locations where MDAR has had reports of individual finds of the spotted lanternfly. So either a dead adult or nymph that has come into the state accidentally, and they've done surveys or trapped to ensure that there is no established population in these locations. So again, if you're looking at this map and you see a dot in the town you live in or work in, don't panic just yet. The spotted lanternfly isn't known to be established there, but there have been many reports of, again, single individuals coming into the state. So this is why we're all on high alert with regard to the spotted lanternfly, because we want to make sure that we slow the spread of this insect. And that's something that Jeremy, Dr. Anderson, will talk about momentarily soon. So I'll leave that up to him. All right, so here's our poll question, our first poll question. Again, this is a reminder to those of you with a pesticide license. Please make sure that you answer this poll question, and Jeffrey is going to help me run that. I believe he's running that right now. So which of the following best describes your knowledge of the life cycle and identification of the spotted lanternfly? Are you an expert? You could probably ID it, you need a refresher, or what is the spotted lanternfly? So we'll give folks a few moments to answer this. Again, please do so if you are looking for credit, but also anybody watching today is encouraged to answer this poll question. And it'll help me to know sort of how much time I should spend on the identification and biology of this insect. It looks like we have about 88% of folks voted. Is that what you were going to say, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I am going to close the poll in a moment. So if you still need to answer the poll, do it now. Okay, the poll closes now.
Thank you, Jeffrey. All right, so it looks like 13% of you said you're an expert, 50% said you could probably ID it, 27% say you need a refresher, and 10% say, what is the spotted lanternfly? So thank you for your honesty and for filling that out. Again, that'll help us award pesticide credit to those who need it, but also that helps me sort of feel good about providing some follow-up information about the identification and biology of this insect. So here we go. This is sort of my slide to tell you why we should care about the spotted lanternfly, and to explain why this insect is something that state, federal, university, and municipal partners are all concerned about this moving into Massachusetts or new locations. The spotted lanternfly is known to have over 103 different host plants, and of course the tree of heaven, or Ailanthus altissima, that is a favored host. I am hearing a little bit of maybe somebody's sound, so I'm not sure if someone has joined us and somehow is not muted. Just pointing that out, if Jeffrey or Ellen could help mute our participants. Sorry about that, everybody. And if you're a participant and have somehow unmuted yourself, I ask that you mute yourself. The other hosts on this list, of course, in managed landscapes are very important to many of us, as well as in agriculture. So I do want to point out that apple, plum, cherry, peach, apricot, or grape crops, as well as blueberries, are threatened by this insect. So not only does it sort of threaten our managed landscapes, but also certain aspects of agriculture. And in Pennsylvania, they have been having or noting a lot of trouble, particularly in vineyards with spotted lanternfly feeding. Again, these insect using piercing, sucking mouthparts to remove host plant fluids. Jeremy will talk a bit about coming up the fact that the insect cannot complete its entire life cycle on all of these hosts, but this is sort of an overview of what spotted lanternfly can feed on. Okay, to delve a little bit deeper into identifying this insect and its life cycle. There is one generation per year of the spotted lanternfly in Pennsylvania, but in other introduced areas in North America. And the sort of timing that I'll be talking about as I go through the biology of this insect is specific to what's been noticed in Pennsylvania. Again, we do not yet have an established population of spotted lanternfly in Massachusetts, so some of this timing may be a little bit different for us. But it's good to sort of get an idea of when and what we should be looking for throughout the season, and what we should be reporting to MDAR, the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources, or your applicable agency in New England. There are also federal cooperators that you can report this insect to as well. So pictured here, we have an adult female who has just laid an egg mass, and each egg mass can have 30 to 50 eggs. Individual eggs that are hidden beneath this secretion that she'll apply over those eggs. So that is white when it is first laid, and then it dries and will crack or harden and may appear to be gray in color or look like dried mud. For whatever reason, sometimes the female doesn't entirely cover all of the eggs either when she applies that secretion. So sometimes you might see the individual eggs in a mass as well, and I'll show photos of that shortly. And they're around 1 inch to 1.5 inches long, or 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch wide. Now this image here I like because it, particularly in Massachusetts, might resonate with a lot of us who are very familiar with the insect formerly known as Gypsy Moth, Lymantria dispar. So we have here a Lymantria dispar egg mass, or again, Gypsy Moth egg mass, this tannish brown egg mass, and hopefully you're seeing here that there are 2 spotted lanternfly egg masses right next to it. So that gives you sort of an idea of the color of the egg masses as well as size compared to an insect that is unfortunately very well known in Massachusetts and much of New England. Just to go back a bit to mention that eggs are seen beginning in late September or October in Pennsylvania and are found, as I mentioned previously, on just about any flat surface through June after hatch. And again, that timing is roughly for Pennsylvania. Nymphs will begin to hatch from the eggs at the beginning of or in late April to early May. And so we can see in the picture on the right here, those are the individual eggs that are lined up here and that are uncovered by that secretion. Either we have one that it might not have been laid by the female, but also others that over time through weathering processes, that sort of covering or coating gets worn off, and you can see the teeny tiny lanternflies just hatching out here. So these are the immature insects that start around late April to early May. There are 4 nymphal instars. So what this means is there are sort of 4 immature life stages, or think of it as the immatures are growing in size, and as they grow, they molt or shed that exoskeleton, and that happens at least 4 times with the spotted lanternfly. And the first 3 are black with white spots. So you can see in these images the teeny tiny nymphs that are black with white spots present from May through the end of June. And then the 4th instar nymphs pictured here, these are typically present in the first week of July in Pennsylvania, and they add that red coloration with the black and white spots. So this is the oldest or largest of, or most mature of the immature life stages. And again, that red coloration tells you that you have here some 4th instars that will, at their next molt, metamorphose into the adults. And so pictured here, we have some pretty wild photos of large clusters of spotted lanternfly adults on these trees, which are typically present by mid-July and live until the first couple of hard frosts kill them. And in Pennsylvania, that might be around November or December, again, to sort of give you an idea roughly of the timing of the life cycle of this insect. Now, this behavior where the adults will group together in these massive numbers. This is another thing to keep in mind, as you could imagine, another reason why nobody really wants to have spotted lanternfly in their own backyard, because they do tend to congregate in numbers that are a bit overwhelming for folks. Okay, so poll question number 2. We'll give everybody in the audience a minute or two to look at this photo, because that will disappear when you are answering the poll question. But which spotted lanternfly life stage is pictured here? Are these the eggs, a first or third through third instar nymph, a fourth instar nymph for immature, or an adult? So have a look at this photo, and then I know Jeffrey will help run the poll momentarily.
The poll will close in 5 seconds.
All right, thank you, Jeffrey. And it looks like 91% of you got the correct answer. So again, remember that the first through third instar nymphs or immature stages have that black coloration with the white spots, and it isn't until the fourth instar that you get the red coloration. So excellent. And a couple of you that answered adults, a good trick with insects to know whether or not you have an immature or an adult life stage. Typically the adults are winged, and this photo is a little bit blurry, but we have just some wing buds here and not fully formed wings. Okay, let's see if I can progress to the next slide. Oh, I did want to show everyone here a video courtesy of folks in Pennsylvania who unfortunately are dealing with this insect in their orchards. So we can see here a lot of adult lanternflies climbing up this apple tree. I apologize for the orientation of the video. Hopefully you can see some that are jumping and flying around in here. And my favorite part is at the end, where we even have one climbing on the camera. So this gives you an idea, again, of why we don't want these insects in our agricultural areas, or certainly in our backyards as well. Just the massive numbers. And if you can sort of imagine if this orchard was a pick your own orchard, that many folks visiting a pick your own probably wouldn't be too enthusiastic about having this many spotted lanternfly adults flying around. I might be a little excited just because I'm an entomologist, but certainly, all jokes aside, we don't want the lanternfly, and this is one of the many reasons why. And so, just to summarize about the impacts of this insect, this slide is courtesy of the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture, and they've noted in their state that the adults, again, because they can be in such high populations, like what you can see on this tree pictured here near these kids' toys and swings, that they can be disruptive to the residents of their state of Pennsylvania and impact their daily life. So it's a quality of life thing for many. We can see here a little bit of the sticky honeydew or sugary excrement or waste from the spotted lanternfly on the right, and some of the black sooty mold that grows on top of that honeydew. And whoops, try to get this to go. So that can be a nuisance. It can be an issue in agriculture. It can also be an issue that stinging insects are attracted or can be attracted to that sugary honeydew. So it can be just a very unpleasant, again, sort of impacting quality of life situation. As I mentioned earlier, longer term impacts to trees and shrubs are yet unknown. We don't necessarily know what will happen in, say, an orchard situation to apple trees over time. But in Pennsylvania, there have been reports of some hosts having flagging or branch dieback as a result of sustained years of feeding from the spotted lanternfly. And then they've also noted increased labor costs for nurseries to meet quarantine requirements, to sort of help keep this insect from going to other locations or prevent it from. And lastly, for my part of the presentation, before I hand it over to Dr. Anderson, I did want to present very quickly some information on behalf of Dr. Jaime Pinheiro and his lab at UMass Amherst. He has set up traps at 16 total locations across Massachusetts in 11 orchards, which are pictured in these red points or dots, and 5 vineyards. We can see the 5 vineyards shown in this cluster of blue locations here. So he has been doing some trapping at those locations and baited his traps with methyl salicylate, which I'm sure Dr. Anderson will talk a bit more about, but this is a lure. It's the active ingredient in wintergreen that is attractive to insects such as the spotted lanternfly. He has hung his traps primarily on maple, black cherry, or birch because luckily at the orchards and vineyards that he's working at, there is no tree of heaven present. But again, Dr. Anderson will probably talk about some of these differences with their work shortly. And I did want to note, in case folks had questions, that Dr. Pinheiro at these orchards and vineyards has not been collecting or recording bycatch or accidental or incidental other insects and organisms that get caught in these traps. And again, that's something Dr. Anderson will give us more details about. But the big important point here is at these locations, Dr. Pinheiro has not detected any lanternflies to date. So that's certainly good news. We don't want them to be at these orchards or vineyards or established in Massachusetts, but we know we have to keep our eyes open for this insect. So my last, I believe, point here is that for folks in Massachusetts, I do want to encourage you, as always, to report the spotted lanternfly if you believe you've seen it. Take a photo, collect a specimen if you safely can, put it in a container and put it in your refrigerator. Note your location, or note the location of where you found the specimen or took the photo, and then go to this website here and report it. And I see Ellen has already shared that in the chat, which is great. So that's where folks living and working in Massachusetts can report the spotted lanternfly. And in a moment, I'll try to share a national reporting website for anyone joining from another state where you can submit your reports as well. Okay, so with that, I believe, yep, we won't do the association credits yet. So I am going to switch the controls over to Dr. Anderson and allow him to get started. Let's see here. Should be coming over shortly, Jeremy.
All right.
Excellent.
Well, Tawny, thank you so much for the introduction, and thank you everyone who's here. My name is Jeremy Anderson. I'm a postdoc in Joseph Elkington's laboratory here at UMass, and I'm going to share with you the integrated research component of this spotted lanternfly monitoring project. Very excited for questions at the end. So please, looking forward to seeing what everyone's thinking about, and I'll do my best to answer them. So as Tawny gave you the introduction, this is an integrated research and extension project. It's funded by the Center for Food, Agriculture, and the Environment. And it's a collaboration with UMass, USDA APHIS, and with MDAR. The integrated aspect of this is that research and extension, especially for invasive species like spotted lanternfly, you can't really separate the two. They're part of the same, the same two sides of the same coin. We need both. We need eyes on the ground. We need people looking for the insects, lanternfly and other invasive species, and the research hopefully can kind of inform that extension, and the extension can inform the research. So as we've been doing for the extension webinars like this, we've been trying to work directly with fruit growers, Dr. Jaime Piñero's work with apple and grape growers. And really important, and the reason I'm so glad there are so many people in attendance today is that we need as many eyes as possible. So people who are working in nurseries, in tree farms, some of the reports that have come in of dead individuals have been associated with the movement of nursery stocks. So please, this is really important for you in the green industry to be keeping your eyes out, to be checking shipments that come in. But for everyone, if you're a landscaper, if you're a homeowner, to take the time, if you see something, lanternfly, thankfully, is a really charismatically distinct insect. There's if a light bulb goes off in your head, or your spider senses on the back of your neck start tingling, take a second look, because it probably is lanternfly. And Tawny showed the picture with the sooty, the mold growing. In high density situations, you'll see is really this kind of like a carpet almost on the side of the tree of the sooty mold growing. So if you see something like that, definitely take a second look. And again, we'll keep sharing the link for reporting it. Please take a picture. If you can, collect it, save it, and notify MDAR right away. And again, we'll keep sharing the link so that you can get information to them as quickly as possible so that they can get there. They've got boots on the ground, can come do surveys, which we'll talk a little bit more about. And for the research part of this program or this project, really we're focusing on early detection. This is not just for spotted lanternfly, but again, for all invasive species. Early detection is critical to reduce the impacts, both economic, but also environmental as well. And in the classroom, we use this figure all the time. So many of you may have seen this before, but the importance of early detection is really from a cost-saving perspective. The earlier on in the establishment of an invasive species, the less it costs to control that, to whether it's an eradication for a small number of individuals, and then as that starts to grow, then we're talking about quarantine zones like we're done for Asian longhorn beetle in Worcester. And then once it's kind of beyond that, then we're talking about long-term management. We're talking about landscape-wide management projects, and these are costly in terms of labor. For insects, we're talking about insecticide applications, or we're talking about other kind of mechanical or cultural controls that are kind of a continued nuisance and a continued expenditure of resources. Where if we started from the beginning, right at that first introduction, the more people who are looking, the more likely we are to find the insect and have this eradication occur before the population takes off. So that's, again, why we need your help. Take photos, contact MDAR so that they can take the appropriate necessary measures. And I think, again, this is a slide we'll use in the classroom a lot. One of the most successful examples of this type of early detection project is for, as Tawny said, the insect that formerly was known as gypsy moth. It currently does not have a common name, so we have to use the scientific name of Lymantria dispar. And this was introduced many, many years ago, late 1800s, depending on which lore of old you want to listen to. It was either an accidental escape from a rather foolish scientific experiment, or it was intentionally released after the experiments were failed. But it became the dominant forest pest in the Northeast. And then, many years later, a slow the spread program was established. This is a multi-state, a multi-agency project that uses a combination of trapping along the kind of the edge of the insect establishment here in gray, and for gypsy moth, or insect formerly known as gypsy moth, pheromone disruption, so that it confuses males so that they can't find the females. Because of this, we've got these yellow, orange, red isocline lines, and these represent where we think the insect would be without the project, and where it will be with this project. So this is, Congress loves funding this project. For every $1 that's spent, they've estimated they get $4 in return, and reducing the impacts on forests, reducing the impacts for homeowners, and documented 70% reduction in the rate of spread. So this kind of early detection is what we're hoping to do with Lanternfly, the research that we're doing to try to slow the spread of Lanternfly into Massachusetts. And unfortunately, Massachusetts, the Northeast, is very susceptible to Lanternfly invasion. Tawny mentioned there's 103 different host plants that have been recorded. With most invasive insects, such as Lanternfly, the more that we study it, the more hosts are generally added to that list. And particularly for an insect like Lanternfly, where it's using a combination of kind of natural lands, the trees that are part of the forest, but also ornamental trees as well, especially ornamental trees that have been introduced from East Asia. These generally are susceptible to Lanternfly, where it has this kind of co-evolutionary history with, and can survive on and complete its life cycle. But that said, there are a number of native trees, tulips, black walnuts, we've got butternuts, and hops for people who are home brewers or just interested in growing hops. Hops are a very susceptible host for Lanternfly. So you can see here on the left, we've got different instars. As Tawny showed, the first through third instars, these are black with white spots. And then the fourth instar had that red coloration on the back. They can survive on different hosts, but not all of them, not all the hosts that we have are suitable for all the different instars. Lanternfly, again, is very distinct, so you shouldn't have too much difficulty confusing it with something else. But I have noticed that first through third instars, brown marmorated stink bug, it's different, but it will give you a second look, or you'll want to give it a second look. So if you do see something black with white spots, that's kind of an immature insect, please stop and take a look, because it most likely for us will be brown marmorated stink bug, which is another invasive pest, but it could be Lanternfly. And again, so we have all these suitable hosts, but we also have a lot of suitability environmentally. And for our research here at UMass, we've been focusing on the Connecticut River Valley, which on this map is red, meaning highly suitable environmentally. So this is based on temperature, rainfall, and the presence of tree of heaven. Most of central Massachusetts and eastern Mass, these are suitable habitat in the orange. The only kind of region of Massachusetts that's not suitable is the Berkshires and more western Massachusetts, where it just seems to be a little bit too cold for the insect to complete its life cycle. And as Tawny mentioned, we have had reports of Lanternfly that MDAR has been responding to. Thankfully, as of now, these have only been single individuals dead associated with hitchhiking, we believe. But this is why we need your help. Keep your eyes out, especially look on vehicles, which we'll come back to, and report right away if you think you see it. So for looking for Lanternfly, Atani mentioned that Tree of Heaven is one of its preferred hosts. This for much of what we're doing, we're using the presence of Tree of Heaven to kind of aid in our search for Lanternfly. And I just wanted to, for those of you who are not familiar with the tree, give a little bit of identification. The photos that Tawny had earlier with the lanternflies, if you were to look at the recording afterwards and go back, whenever you see a lanternfly on that kind of compound leaf, it was Tree of Heaven. And kind of the best way to distinguish it is there's this little nodule at the base of each of the leaf leaves. So it's a compound leaf. It looks a lot like black walnut leaves. It looks a lot like sumac leaves. But once you look at it, you'll see this little nodule at the base of each leaflet, and that's very distinct. There's nothing else like that. One thing that I've noticed that kind of makes roadside identification a little bit easier is the upper canopy, or the tips of the leaves sometimes get a reddish tint. Black walnut, I've never seen that on. You do get it a little bit on sumac, but so if you're driving, if you're walking, and you see something that's got compound leaves, it's got a little bit of reddish tint to it, take a break, take a look, enjoy the smell, and that's actually a funny identification as well. You can crush the leaves, you can scrape the bark a little bit, and you might smell either described as burnt popcorn or a peanut butter aroma. So it's kind of like the Jelly Belly the beans, the ones that you didn't want to gab, but some people really like it. Also, another way in the winter to identify it, the bark gets kind of this cantaloupe look, and the samaras, which you can see in this drawing, they're the seed structures. The plant will retain them through the winter. And another kind of very distinguishing characteristic is it really likes disturbed habitats. So if you're in Massachusetts, if you're driving down 91, for example, because this is what we were doing a lot, driving down 91 towards Springfield, by the time you get to Holyoke, it pretty much becomes the dominant roadside tree on the medians, and you can see where it's being mowed. But in other locations, if you see something with compound leaves growing up in the middle of a parking lot, it's most likely Tree of Heaven as well. And unfortunately, that kind of aids to its ability to be a host for this hitchhiking insect, where you can picture people driving and stopping at a rest stop. And that's one location that MDAR is doing surveys. And so for the surveys, we really have right now 3 methods. And our hope is to improve upon these methods as part of this research project. So visual surveys are done. There you have individual trees, particularly Tree of Heaven, that can be scanned using binoculars from all cardinal directions. The insect tends to congregate at the base of the tree and then climb up it, as you saw in those videos. Unfortunately, this is, you can imagine this is time and labor intensive for something that can be found on a wide range of hosts. The priority is for Tree of Heaven, but if you've got black walnuts, if you've got other susceptible hosts, there's going to be a lot of trees that need to be scanned. So it's one of the first kind of attempts at collecting insects, the lanternfly, without doing the visual methods, was the use of sticky bands. This is familiar to anyone who saw the great Gypsy Moth outbreaks, insect formerly known as, where the numbers of insects become so overwhelming. This is great in high density locations like have been seen in Pennsylvania right now, in New Jersey right now. The insects, again, they climb up the tree. They have this behavior where they aggregate together and then they climb. And when they climb up, they get stuck in the sticky bands. Unfortunately, these sticky bands are associated with avian and other terrestrial vertebrate bycatch. So once these started being used in Pennsylvania, almost immediately there were calls coming into animal control about birds in particular coming and swooping in to eat the lanternflies and then getting trapped in the sticky bands. So thankfully, we have an improved method. This is a modified trap that's been used for plum cuculio. It's very easy to make yourself, or almost every commercial provider for insect trapping equipment sells it. Walmart even sells it. So you can buy this, you can make it. It's a mesh bag essentially that goes around the plant, the Tree of Heaven, or a tree such as apple trees, if you're interested in monitoring your apple orchard. And it's got a collection tube at the top. The insects climb up the tree, they go into the bag, and then they get stuck. then this allows it to be very easy for people to come. They can look, they can see inside the cup, and here it's pretty obvious. There's lots of lanternfly. You can also see there's lots of lanternfly climbing out of the container, up the tree that didn't get funneled into it. But as far as a passive method for detection, this is very convenient. Now, we don't know yet, though, if this is effective in low density locations. It seems effective in high densities, and that's the research that we're doing right now, is to see how can we improve upon this method for low density, which might be such as we have in Massachusetts. And as Tawny showed before, the idea here is to include a lure. Dr. Pinheiro is using methyl salicylate in the orchards and the vineyards. This is a broad spectrum, as was mentioned. It's wintergreen. It attracts a large number of insects, and what we're trying to compare it to is something that can be more specific to lanternfly. So thankfully, chemical ecology has come to the rescue. We're collaborating with Dr. Miriam Cooperband at USD APHIS, and she's been researching and isolating chemicals from the lanternflies that could be used to attract them. So just like with Lymantria dispar, we're looking for some type of a pheromone or some type of other aerial attractant that will pull low density numbers of individuals into the traps so that we can collect and monitor them more effectively. Dr. Cooperband has been doing a combination of what we call them Y olfactometer assays, where you can see a little on the left here, there's this like strange Y-shaped structure. There's a little lanternfly in it, and she'll put either a male or a female into the tube. And then on either side, there'll be either a chemical or a control. And then the lanternfly walks through the arena, and depending on which side it goes to, either the chemical or the control, that's recorded. And then they can try different chemicals. They can try, often an insect will be washed in a solution, and then that kind of the filtration that comes from that wash is used as the attractant. So some of the research that she's finding is that males, not surprisingly, are attracted to females. Although for folks who study plant hoppers, this actually is a bit surprising. To date, there has been no, if I have this correct, there have been no identified pheromones from plant hoppers, even though there are a number of pest species. So this is exciting, and she's very interested to keep going with this research. And the other interesting result is that males have an aggregation behavior, but it doesn't seem to be associated with a chemical. So it might be more of a visual cue where they're seeing, I mean, we're at UMass, the students are back, so it's kind of like a frat party, I guess. Like there's some type of critical mass. You see enough people at the party and you say, okay, that's where I'm going. So the males are doing that, and then the females conceivably are going to check out to see if there's suitable mates at the aggregation. With this work, Dr. Cooperband is finding a number of different chemicals that are attracting the lanternflies. Again, some of them might be a pheromone. We're not sure yet. And you can also see that methyl salicylate is very attractive. It's similar to compounds being released from the Tree of Heaven plant, so that could be associated with it. And it's also something that's associated with kind of like distressed plants. So that again could be bringing in more of the insects because they know that that this might be a suitable host for them to feed on. Okay, so with that background, we've got our first poll question for my section, and which of the following hosts can spotted lanternfly complete its life cycle upon?
88% of you have answered the poll question. I'll close the poll question in a few seconds. So please answer the question if you like to answer right now. Okay.
All right.
The poll question is closed, and
Great.
63% got it right, and so
Yeah, no, thank you. This is great. So, everyone, I'm very happy. It's funny that it's a funny thing to be happy about, but that's a great response. So thank you everyone who listened through that spiel to see that all of the above was the correct answer. It kind of feels like an SAT question. Tree of Heaven is the preferred host, but we also have these other hosts that are very abundant. Maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, MDAR had a webinar on spotted lanternfly, and one thing that was absolutely amazing about it was a gentleman from the New Jersey Department of Agriculture showed the lanternfly on, he took his phone and he walked everyone through to see it climbing up these Tree of Heaven plants, but also the grapevines that are there. So wild grapes, we're definitely worried about grape growers, but wild grapes, Oriental bittersweet, these are plants that they're common in our forests, black walnut, butternut, and they're all susceptible hosts. So we're definitely worried about Tree of Heaven as a indicator species, but our these other species that are here, it can survive on as well. So and this is just a funny photo that a neighbor sent me earlier this month. She was at a coffee shop in Manhattan, and this is just I don't know what the plant is, but it's an ornamental plant that was potted plant outside of the coffee shop, and there was a lanternfly just right on it. So it not just Tree of Heaven is my take-home message. So to get finally to our research that we've been doing, we're trying to combine the chemicals that Dr. Cooperman is isolating and test them in a low density situation, which is thankfully in Massachusetts we have no lanternfly yet, but going forward there could be, and to see if the lures that she's developing and the trunk traps can be used together to kind of pull in lanternflies in low densities. To do this, we had to find Tree of Heaven, as I was mentioning, especially south of Holyoke, heading towards the Connecticut border. It becomes much easier to find, but it is there. As soon as you start looking, especially in disturbed locations, it was planted at one point as an ornamental. So it's there, and please do keep your eyes out for it, and try to think about those distinguishing characteristics: the cantaloupe bark, the smell, the nodule on the leaves or the leaflets. And then we're comparing the attractant that she's developed. She's calling it Splat right now. And it's these little dollops that we're placing them on the side of the tree trunk with a large caulking gun, and comparing that to methyl salicylate, as you saw that Jaime Pinheiro is using, as well as a control. Big part of this, and the photo on the left is a little bit out of date, but again, a big take-home message for me is that much of this research requires citizen scientists. So we looked at iNaturalist to get records of Tree of Heaven, and then we were able to use those records to kind of fine-tune our search so we could find the host more readily. And you can see Lanternfly. This is over a year old, this photo, on the left. So people who are taking photos, who are uploading it, this is critical information for MDAR, for us, to help find these insects and to understand where it might become a pest as it spreads, unfortunately. Our locations, you saw a little bit of this slide with Dr. Pinheiro's orchards and his vineyards, and we're the red triangle. So we have sites along the Connecticut River Valley, or in the Connecticut River Valley, and we also have a site in Connecticut at the USDA Forest Service Quarantine Laboratory. It's not established there yet, but Lanternfly has been or is established in more southwestern Connecticut. So this was kind of going to be our canary in the coal mine to see about the rate of spread. We have a number of different locations. Really would like to thank the folks at Greenfield, Parks and Recreation, UMass Arboretum, the trustees of reservation, the National Park Service for letting us use the Armory, and Baypath University. All locations had stands of Tree of Heaven that we were able to set up our traps and continue monitoring at. Thankfully, after all this, we have not recovered any lanternfly yet, but we are finding that the lures seem to have, like some differences in which insects they attract, but no overall differences in the number of insects. So they all seem to be pretty good and comparable to the control in terms of insect or other arthropod bycatch. The only thing that seems to be a little bit different is millipedes. At one location, and it could be something with the tree, it could be something with the actual splat compound. Lots and lots of millipedes in the trap. Thankfully, there's no kill strip in it, so these can be set free if we wanted to. But unfortunately for our study insects, they all came back and were frozen in the lab so that we could identify them to order, and now we're identifying them to family. The Armory in particular was interested in bycatch of honeybees, and thankfully we're not seeing any honeybees in any of our traps, and we're actually seeing much less, it looks like less, total catch of those type of insects as well. But we're continuing. This is an insect that is active now, and it will continue to be active until about a first hard freeze. So now August, September, all the way, if it's warm enough, into December, the females will be laying eggs, the adults will be spreading, and we will continue checking the traps until that first hard freeze. And especially we'll be prioritizing UMass Arboretum. I'll show you in a minute why. Baypath University, they've been really incredibly generous in letting us use their location to keep monitoring. They've got a large stand of Tree of Heaven that they do want to cut down, but thankfully they agreed to not cut it down until after our research was done. And that's our southernmost point in Massachusetts. And so if something is coming up through the Connecticut River Valley, that's where we'll detect it first. And again, at the quarantine facility in Asonia. But so one reason why I want to keep checking the UMass traps in particular, I was driving to campus yesterday and I forgot that it was fall move-in. And I was all of a sudden started seeing all these license plates from Connecticut, from New Jersey, from Pennsylvania, from New York. And I was just thinking to myself, wow, this is a perfect time of year for lanternfly to be dispersing, hitchhiking. And here is this just congregation of vehicles from all over the Northeast that are coming together to bring students back to the university. Now, this is a student's drawing that I found on the internet, just saying, please look before you leave, especially for RVs, box trucks, any type of vehicle. Really, the lanternfly, if it's got a flat surface, she'll try to lay her eggs on it. And she successfully will lay eggs on it. So in Pennsylvania, they're having a really successful program similar to what's being done with boaters, asking people to check their vehicles, to clean their vehicles, and especially if you travel to a location, or from that map that was shown earlier, where if there is a known infestation of lanternfly, we might be getting into a situation where just like for boaters, where you clean your boat every time you go into a new body of water. When you cross state lines, we should start thinking about inspecting our vehicles so that we don't have hitchhikers coming in and becoming established. So if you want more lanternfly information, I know that was a lot. We have a recording from our earlier invasive insect webinar series that's available online. UMass Extension has a fantastic website, including information about spotted lanternfly. And please, if you think you see it, take a picture and send it right away to MDAR. The link is here. It's been shared in the chat. And the more, the more just eyes that we have out there looking for lanternfly, the more likely we are to detect it before it becomes established and before it becomes a major economic and environmental pest. With that, also please feel free to email me, and I'd like to thank Amanda Halpern, a graduate student at UMass in Brian Kane's lab, and Caroline Schelling, who is a cafe summer scholar with honey. And so thank you so much.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And I wanted to now, I think, open things up to questions from the audience, which are already coming in. And I have one for you, Jeremy. If you don't mind, we can start off with that, as I know you'll need to step away around 11:15. So have there been any catches or significant numbers of native or solitary bees as bycatch in your traps?
Oh, that's a great question. And that was definitely it's interesting that the Armory was particularly worried about honeybees because they have a colony, but that definitely got us worried about other pollinators. And so far, the numbers of Hymenoptera in particular have been very, very low. I'd have to flip back to the slides, but there's no significant catch, thankfully. And that's similar to what Dr. Cooper Band has reported in Pennsylvania, where they haven't had any reports of any significant numbers of pollinators, whether they be Hymenoptera, so the bees, or Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths.
Excellent, thank you. Another question, I believe in relation to the map that I showed earlier, why is spotted lanternfly not present in South Jersey? I have to switch, and actually I had another question related to that map, so maybe Jeremy, I'll take over and just throw that back up on the screen if I can. Hopefully folks are seeing this. Oops, if I can get it in full screen. Okay, so why not South Jersey? I mean, it looks like to me that much of New Jersey has these areas in blue, known established populations of spotted lanternfly. I can't answer that off the top of my head other than maybe just how the insect is moving itself or how people are accidentally moving it or aiding in that movement. Jeremy, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I would just assume that it just hasn't been established yet. Unfortunately, it'd just be a matter of time. Depending on whether there are suitable hosts, it does seem to be suitable habitat environmentally. I'm trying to remember where where the pine barrens are. So maybe it's just not enough hosts there yet, or maybe it just hasn't been reported, which is also very possible.
Thank you. Another question related to this map while I have it up. Our friends at the Maine Department of Agriculture noted that individual, not established, but individual finds of the spotted lanternfly have occurred in Maine, let me see, as well as New Hampshire, but are not reported on this map. And if you go to the New York State Integrated Pest Management Program's website, they have a little disclaimer beneath this map saying that it depends on the reporting from those states, who's giving them their information so that they can aggregate it into one location and report out on it. So I just wanted to use that as an opportunity to highlight, if you are living in another state that's not shown on this map and you are concerned or have questions, please contact your individual state's Department of Agriculture. Let's see. Okay, let's see if I can grab a few more questions or any questions specific to Dr. Anderson's research. And thank you. Wow, a lot are coming in. Let's see. Are there any known predators of the spotted lanternfly? I know this isn't directly related to trapping, but Jeremy, is this something you want to answer?
Sure. This came up in the MDAR webinar as well. So yes is the answer. There are several insects that have been reported. These are primarily have been generalist predatory Hemiptera as well, so with the sucking, piercing mouth parts. Unfortunately, as you saw in the photo of the sticky band, avian predators, and kind of anecdotal evidence has been that birds are recognizing it more and more in Pennsylvania. I wouldn't be able to give you a p-value for that, but I've been told that that it seems like there's more avian predation of the lanternfly than there was before. Many native insects and avian predators, it does take some time for them to recognize a potential host, or a potential target in this case. So hopefully that trend continues and we'll get more native predation. But there is, it's been on hold because of COVID, but USDA APHIS was doing foreign exploration to identify potential biological control agents in China and Korea. They're working actively on that in the quarantine labs. The foreign component of it had to be on hold because of travel restrictions, but they are definitely hoping to get back out as soon as it's safe to do so, to identify an insect kind of like the ninja moth or the ninja wasp that's being used for brown marmorated stink bug. So hopefully there'll be more predators that can help reduce the abundance of this pest.
Thank you. Another question related to your trapping. Not sure if you can answer this or not, but where on the Baypath campus are the traps located? Is that something you feel comfortable answering?
highly classified. It's on a need to know basis. No, I wouldn't feel comfortable answering it, but it's not a secret for any reason. If someone is interested, they could email me directly. I think it's the best way to do that.
Okay, thank you. Just in the interest of preserving those traps at this time, right? Okay. Oh, I had a question much earlier on that I thought was interesting. Oh, and I'm having a trouble finding it, but it was to the extent of, oh, here it is. Can such a large insect be used as a food, exotic, served in restaurants, ground up for pet food, etc.? And I did want to hop in, but Jeremy, if you want to add to this too, is to say that I'm not certain that spotted lanternfly would be the best choice for entomophagy or using insects as food. We know that that is something that is done in a lot of other cultures, and eating insects can be beneficial for reasons such as they're high in protein or low in fat. But I do believe that when spotted lanternfly feeds on its preferred host, tree of heaven, it may begin to sequester some unpleasant chemicals from that host plant. So I think there's some research from 2018 showing that change in color, particularly going from the third to the fourth instar nymph, getting that sort of red coloration, that might have something to do with the fact that at that time the insect starts to feed more on tree of heaven and sequesters some of these unpleasant compounds. So it's then sort of warning coloration to tell potential predators that, hey, I don't really taste good, you shouldn't eat me. Is this sort of your understanding, Dr. Anderson?
Yes, my understanding is, in general, when red coloration for insects and other animals as well is a warning coloration saying I've sequestered poisonous chemicals, don't eat me. And it can be a false badge, but for a lanternfly, it does appear to be an honest signal saying that they've accumulated enough toxins that most things won't want to eat them. But that said, it might be possible. I haven't heard of people eating lanternfly yet. There is a big push for other invasive organisms for people to eat them. The World Health Organization would really like us to start eating more insects, just in general, as a sustainable food crop. Just as a warning, though, many people who have shellfish allergies will also have allergies to insects. The chitin in the exoskeleton can cause an allergic reaction. So it's definitely something that if someone wants to learn, I would research it a little bit more. But they're just like is being done with silverfish, it might be something you see on a menu in a Brooklyn hotspot sometime soon.
I guess in general, I would say I wouldn't recommend it just in case, they're one of the insects that could make you feel ill. And there have been questions in Pennsylvania about, can the spotted lanternfly impact my dog or pets? And I think, the current messaging is that vets, of course, don't recommend allowing your pets to eat these insects, and that I think if they eat a lot of them, there have been reports of them getting sick from that, but I don't think to the extent where it's been lethal or anything like that, but just probably not a good idea in this case. I do have a question specific to trapping from Ryan. Dr. Anderson, do you have any idea what density of a spotted lanternfly infestation is needed for them to then be detected in the traps?
Yeah, that's a great question. The kind of the search image that Dr. Cooperband gave us to look for was hopefully like 1 to 5 individuals, and I forget the exact square footage, but we were looking for hopefully single individuals on a tree, very small numbers of individuals in the kind of surrounding landscape. The Pennsylvania sites that she's been working at, one reason that we were excited to do this was that the densities are already so high there that they've had to not, there's too many individuals for them to trap. The kind of laboratory indication is 1 to 5 individuals per tree would be detected, and that's kind of what we were hoping for. Hoping that it would be successful at, but thankfully we didn't find any lanternfly in our survey.
Thank you. Let's see, how much time do we have here? Another question, and maybe you can answer this, Jeremy. Is PCR still being used to detect the spotted lanternfly?
It is. So there was a seminar, I believe, last year where they were talking about the use of eDNA, so environmental DNA, to look for lanternfly. This is definitely being done. It's successful right now in high density locations, more on a kind of a proof of concept method. It can be used, and it probably will continue to be used for high valuable things. There's projects for similar type of stop the spread invasive species where, for example, you might swab, just like many people have been doing nasal swabs for COVID. You could swab the side of a truck, for example, and then use PCR to see if it might have had contact with lanternfly and whether it should have a more thorough quarantine inspection. So that is something that we'll probably see more of going forward.
Thank you. A lot of questions coming in, and I apologize in advance to those of you who we won't be able to get to your questions. I did want to note that I did just share some resources from Penn State Extension in the chat. I've had a couple questions come in about either chemical, physical, or cultural management of the spotted lanternfly, and so I do recommend that folks go to that Penn State website for more information. There's a lot of research currently being done. There's information that's currently known, and some things that sort of Pennsylvania being on the forefront of the spotted lanternfly has already learned. So again, please go to that website for more information. I had another question about host plants. I know on one of my previous slides, I had shared that low bush blueberry is known to be a host, and I had a question about, is high bush blueberry known to be a host? And the answer to that is yes, and I apologize for any confusion by not including all of that there, but as you saw, there are over 100 different host plants, so it's hard to list all of the trees and shrubs and agriculturally important plants that are impacted by the spotted lanternfly. Let's see. Maybe one more question if we can fit this in. What do we have? Oh, there've been a lot of questions coming in, and I thank you all for that. Oh, a lot coming in, sorry. Here's one. Oi, good question. My arborist wanted me to take down all tree of heaven on my property solely because of the spotted lanternfly. This person doesn't identify where they live, but I assume it's outside of Massachusetts. Last year, I began removing a large area of knotweed as well. The shaded areas with tree of heaven are the only areas where the knotweed, and I think their question might have gotten cut off, where the knotweed is not growing. So it sounds like they have an issue with a lot of invasive plants as well. But Jeremy, is that something you want to speak to about the removal of Tree of Heaven as a result of this pest?
Well, that's one thing they're doing in Pennsylvania, in particular, to try to slow the spread is Tree of Heaven removal. So that's definitely something to consider. It is a non-native and invasive species, so the removal of it, while many people like it as an ornamental, it's something to consider, I would say.
And I believe there's more, as Jeremy mentioned, there's more information about that at that link from Penn State Extension. They talk a bit more about either selectively removing Tree of Heaven or potentially treating Tree of Heaven with insecticides because of how attractive Tree of Heaven is to the spotted lanternfly. There are other strategies that you can use. You could treat them with a systemic insecticide, and then any spotted lanternflies that are then attracted to the Tree of Heaven and feed on it would be killed by that application. So it can sort of act as a trap tree, if you will. Let's see here. Sorry, lots of things coming in. So questions about pesticide credits and association credits I'm seeing, and again, hang on to the end of today's presentation, and I will be giving those instructions momentarily. I just think we should end maybe with this last question and move on to the pesticide and association credits. That would be, does any one life stage of the spotted lanternfly tend to hitchhike more than the other? And I think maybe we already spoke to this, but Jeremy, do you want to add anything?
Well, it is a good question. I mean, the eggs, I mean, it's a funny stage because it's very passive, but the eggs is a very, very dispersal kind of, I'm trying to think of the right word. That's a really key time in its life cycle that we need to be looking for. And unfortunately, that's the most cryptic stage because it wants to lay its eggs on the sides of things like RVs and trailers and trucks and anything that's got a large flat surface. And then you go camping and you drive your RV and all of a sudden it's spread. So that's a very dispersal life stage. Most of the individuals that are getting reported to MDAR or these ones on the map that were shown, they were adults. I'm not sure, and MDAR would have to speak specifically to it whether they're seeing much dispersal from the immatures. But my feeling is that it's mostly the adults that are being dispersed, and then the eggs as well.
Yes, yeah, any life stage can move readily, but certainly, like Dr. Anderson says, those egg masses being so cryptic, they can be found on, stone, patio furniture, firewood, vehicles, just about anything. I did just see a message from the Mass Department of Agricultural Resources. Dr. Jennifer Foreman-Orth mentions that only one nymph has been found in Massachusetts so far. So it is primarily the adults that are being sort of accidental hitchhikers. So keep an eye out for all of these different life stages. Please report them. And again, those reporting links for Massachusetts and other nearby states are found in the chat. I want to thank you, Jeremy, for your time and your excellent presentation today. And just thank you again. And if you have to sign off, I totally understand.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you, everyone.